We're gonna test the Aversion perks in New World. We're gonna see if the Aversion perks work and if they actually block ability damage as well. A quick overview of the Aversion perks. You get two different Aversion perks. You get Physical Aversion and Elemental Aversion. If you have an Aversion perk, you basically take less damage from range attacks. So for example, if you have Elemental Aversion, you take less damage from range Fire Staff attacks or Ice Gauntlet attacks. In this test, we're only going to use boots with 3.8% Aversion, which will be the Elemental Aversion and Physical Aversion. Since these items with the Aversion perk on my server cost a lot of money, I'm only going to use the boots in this test. And making all of these test videos has left me broke, so I'm only going to test the boots. Let's test the Fire Staff. We've gotten some weird results after testing the Fire Staff. So if we tested it with Elemental Aversion, the auto attacks did 2.94% less damage with Elemental Aversion, and if we tested it with Physical Aversion, we got 0.61% less damage, meaning that the Physical Aversion perk actually worked on the Fire Staff. This shouldn't be possible, so this is definitely a bug. I'm also gonna test the Ice Gauntlet later in this video to see if we get the same results. We also found out that the Elemental Aversion and Physical Aversion perk works on Fire Staff abilities. I'm just gonna pop up a table here showing you the results we got. As you can see, with Fireball, Meteor and Pillar, we basically got a 3% reduction on the ability. So if we used Elemental Aversion, we got a 3% reduction in the damage of the ability. And the same with Physical Aversion, we basically got a 0.7% reduction in the ability damage if we used Physical Aversion. So I'm thinking that the Fire Staff is bugged and the Physical Aversion perk shouldn't work on the Fire Staff, but it does, just by a little bit. Now we're going to test the Ice Gauntlet just to make sure that it's only the Fire Staff being bugged. So with the Ice Gauntlet, we saw that versus Elemental Resistance, the auto attack of the Ice Gauntlet is reduced by 2.88%. And with Physical Aversion, the auto attack isn't reduced. So, and if we looked at all of the abilities of the Ice Gauntlet, some of the abilities are also reduced by Elemental Aversion, and none of the abilities are reduced by Physical Aversion. So if we tested with Ice Spike, we got 0 resistance from Elemental Aversion, but if we tested Storm and Pylon, we got about a 3% resistance from Elemental Aversion, but when we tested with Physical Aversion, we got no reduction in damage, meaning that the Fire Staff is bugged and it's not the Aversion perks causing the problem, but as we saw, we are getting less resistance than indicated on the boots. Now we're going to test the musket without the gem, and later in this video we're going to test the musket with an elemental gem to actually see the results with physical weapons. So as you saw, the Physical Aversion perk is actually working on the musket. So on the auto attacks we got 3.2% reduction on the auto attacks, and with the abilities we also got a reduction. So it treats the musket abilities like an auto attack as well. So we got about a 3.1% reduction in all of the musket abilities where it loaded in a bullet. With the conclusion here is that it does work on the musket abilities, and if you want to know the rest of the abilities, you gotta test it yourself. That being said, when we tested the Elemental Aversion against the musket, we got no reduction from the Elemental Aversion perk. So this brings up the question that, what if we slot in an Elemental gem in the musket, which splits the damage in half Elemental and half Physical? Will the Elemental Aversion still work, and will Physical Aversion also work? So let's go test that. For this test I had to go and buy some new boots, so the armor values of the boots is going to change. It's going to be split even, but it's still going to be 3.8% elemental aversion and physical aversion, meaning that the test results will still give the same outcome. So in this test, if we slot in an elemental gem in the musket, we saw that we got a 1.85% reduction on the auto attack. So if we have elemental aversion or physical aversion, the damage is getting reduced by half, which makes sense since the elemental gem splits the damage in half. So with the elemental aversion perk we got 1.58% damage reduction, and with the physical aversion perk we got 1.58% physical reduction, meaning that both of them work the same. So we got the same results from both aversion perks. Having done this test, I'm thinking that elemental aversion is more valuable than physical aversion, since most people will basically have chain on their weapons and they will have elemental gems on their weapons to split the damage. Also, these elemental aversion perks block damage from the fire staff, the Ice Gauntlet and so forth. So it blocks damage from the abilities. So the first tick of the ability, it blocks the damage. So the elemental aversion perk is more valuable than the physical aversion perk. I'm also thinking that if people run chain, they're gonna do less damage on their auto attacks. The same goes for the new meta going around where people slot in aquamarines to do ice damage. If you didn't know, if you slot in an aquamarine in your weapon and you throw an Ice Gauntlet ability, you basically do 25% more damage with your weapon if it has an aquamarine equipped or chain ice on your weapon. I could make a video about this build if you want me to, just let me know in the comments. So what's the conclusion? The conclusion is that the elemental aversion perk and physical aversion perk is working, but is also not working. It's not giving us the right amount indicated on the armor. Also that the elemental aversion perk is reducing damage from abilities and not just auto attacks. So if you throw a fireball, a ice storm and so forth, the damage of those abilities are going to be reduced by the elemental resistance. The same goes for physical resistance. It is getting reduced by the musket auto attacks or physical auto attacks, but it is also reducing the abilities of the musket where you have to load in a bullet, like the powder burn, powder shot and shooter stance abilities. So I'm thinking this goes the same for the bow, where you have to use ability where you actually have to draw your arrow. Also remember that the fire staff is a little bit buggy. It's getting damage reduced by physical aversion, which shouldn't be the case. And of course we tested the elemental gem on the musket, so the damage is getting reduced by elemental gems as well. So the damage is going to be reduced if you use an elemental gem in your weapon as well, which makes the elemental aversion perk more valuable than the physical aversion gem. I would consider these elemental aversion and physical aversion perks as best in slot perks for your armor. I would even say that I would choose aversion perks above freedom, since this will prevent you from getting one-shotted. If you want to know if resilient or freedom is working, you can watch one of these two videos.